What if I told you the ATF is being dismantled? Not by Congress, not through sweeping legislation, but from the inside. That while the media has been focused on political distractions and courtroom drama, a quiet restructuring is underway that could change the face of federal gun enforcement forever. I know that sounds dramatic, but here's the deal. Nearly 1,000 ATF agents are being reassigned, and the way this is happening is setting off alarm bells across the anti-gun lobby. You're not seeing this on the front page of the Times or blasted across your newsfeed, but believe me, it's real, and it could be just the beginning. Now, if you've been following the gun rights conversation for any length of time, you already know that there's been a long-standing debate in this country about what to do with the ATF. For years, people on our side of the issue have been asking the same question. Do we abolish the agency altogether, or do we just gut it, restructure it, and make it irrelevant? So, here's what just happened. Acting ATF Director Kash Patel announced that approximately 1,000 ATF agents, roughly a third of the agency's entire field force, are being temporarily reassigned. And they're not being shuffled around within the ATF either. They're being sent over to the FBI, primarily to support immigration enforcement and border operations. Now, if you've been paying attention, you know that's a massive shift. Think about it. 1/3 of the boots-on-the-ground personnel who enforce federal gun laws are suddenly no longer working within the agency that enforces those laws. That's not a minor adjustment. That's the kind of move that guts an agency from the inside without ever needing to pass a single law or sign a single executive order. According to the ATF's own spokesperson, this is just a temporary reassignment of resources aimed at bolstering public safety and helping the fight against criminal organizations. They also framed it as a continuation of the agency's strategy of launching surge operations in high-crime areas, a tool they've used before to coordinate with local law enforcement. But here's the thing. They didn't give a timeline, no end date, no clear explanation of when or if these agents will return to their original posts. And that ambiguity? That's what's setting off alarm bells in Washington. Because if you wanted to slowly dismantle an agency without drawing too much attention, this is exactly how you do it. And make no mistake, people on the left are paying attention. They're furious. And that, to me, signals that this move is anything but routine. Now, you know how it goes. When the anti-gun politicians start sending letters to the White House, something big is happening. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. A group of Democratic members of Congress, you can probably guess who, fired off a not-so-friendly letter to President Biden demanding that Kash Patel be removed as acting ATF director. According to them, he's unqualified, he lacks experience fighting crime, and this reassignment scheme is reckless. But let's take a step back. Since Patel's been involved, we've seen the FBI apprehend 3 out of the 10 most wanted criminals in the country. That's not a small feat. And if he truly lacked any competence in law enforcement, those kinds of results wouldn't be happening. The truth is, they're not upset because Patel's ineffective. They're upset because he's effective in ways they didn't expect. He's not targeting lawful gun owners. He's not weaponizing the ATF the way they want. That's the real issue here. And it gets better. These same lawmakers claim that the bipartisan Safer Communities Act brought gun violence down by 2%. That sounds great, until you realize that the FBI revised their own crime stats and showed there was actually nearly a 5% increase in gun violence after that legislation passed. So, yeah, they're cooking the numbers and hoping no one notices. This backlash isn't about public safety, it's about power. And the fact that they're trying to bury Patel tells me he's doing exactly what needs to be done. Let's talk a little more about that bipartisan Safer Communities Act, because the narrative around it is a perfect example of how misinformation gets baked into policy debates. The anti-gun crowd has been beating this drum that the act reduced gun violence by 2 full percentage points. That's what they've been telling the media, their constituents, and anyone else who'll listen. But here's what they conveniently leave out. Shortly after those numbers were released, the FBI took a closer look and corrected the data. And what did that new data show? Not a decrease, but a nearly 5% increase in gun-related crimes. That's a massive shift. That's not some small revision. It's a complete reversal of the original talking point. But have you heard them walk that back? Of course not. Because the real goal wasn't accuracy. It was perception. If they could sell the idea that gun control is working, they could justify more of it. But the truth is right there in the numbers. Their policies aren't working. And when someone like Patel comes in and shakes up the status quo, suddenly they can't fall back on their usual narratives. They hate being exposed, and this reassignment, whether they admit it or not, pulls the rug out from under them. This reassignment isn't just a reshuffling of personnel. It's part of a much bigger strategy. I said it before, and I'll say it again. I never believed we'd see the ATF completely abolished, not in one fell swoop. But what we are seeing is something more surgical, more calculated. A quiet neutering of the agency, a reallocation of its power, one move at a time. This administration appears to be playing the long game. Rather than blowing up the ATF with legislation that would stall out in Congress or ignite a national firestorm, they're choosing to undercut it from within. This move takes a massive bite out of the agency's operational ability without even needing to touch its funding. It doesn't need a vote, it doesn't need a press conference. It just happens, quietly. And look, we've seen this playbook already. Just look at what's going on with the Department of Education. We're not seeing sweeping abolitions. We're seeing steady, deliberate efforts to move resources away from bloated federal agencies and back toward priorities that actually matter to Americans. This is the same idea, just applied to gun policy. And the more I watch it unfold, the more convinced I am that this isn't just a one-off. This is the first step in a much broader effort to dismantle an agency that's been used for decades to chip away at lawful gun ownership. If this continues, it could change the game. Now, this isn't the only sign that the tides are turning. Look at what Attorney General Bondi is doing. He's quietly working to restore firearm rights, something that for the last 30 years was pretty much impossible. Why? Because Congress defunded the federal agencies responsible for that process decades ago. They pulled the plug and never put a penny back in, and that left thousands of Americans with no real path to get their rights restored. But Bondi decided to flip the script. He redirected resources from within his own office to restart those efforts. And what was the reaction from the political left? Absolute hysteria. You would have thought he was handing out machine guns on Capitol Hill. But all he did was open a door that had been sealed shut for decades, and suddenly, people who had been wrongfully denied their rights had a pathway again. And that's what this is really about. Not just punishing bad policy, but rebuilding access to rights that should have never been taken in the first place. This isn't a PR stunt. It's about giving real people real solutions. And that's what scares them most. Because once that door opens, it's hard to close again. Now I get it. Some of you wanted all of this to happen faster. You were hoping that on day one, Attorney General Bondi would come out swinging and start torching every policy the ATF ever touched. You wanted the lawsuits to vanish, the regulations to be wiped clean, and maybe even an executive order to abolish the ATF outright. And believe me, I understand that feeling. But that's just not how this game is played. We can hope for the knockout punch, but what we're seeing instead is something more disciplined, and honestly, more effective. This administration isn't looking for headlines. They're moving the chess pieces, one at a time, in ways that permanently shift the balance of power. You might not see the explosion, but you will see the fallout, and it's already happening. So yeah, maybe it's not the fiery revolution some folks imagined, but if you're willing to look past the surface, you'll see it. The ATF is losing its bite. Its resources are being drained, its power diluted, and its mission redirected. That's not defeat, it's strategy. And if they keep this up, it'll be the most meaningful Second Amendment victory we've seen in years. So, what does all this mean for you, for lawful, responsible gun owners? It means we might finally be turning the corner. For years, the ATF operated like a sledgehammer, aggressive enforcement, unclear rules, and zero accountability. But now, the grip is loosening. With 1/3 of their agents reassigned and more attention being paid to restoring rights than restricting them, we're looking at a shift in federal priorities. That means fewer resources directed at harassing gun shops and legal owners. It means more opportunities to challenge overreach. And it might even mean getting back rights that were taken without due process. Look, this isn't the end of the fight. Not even close. But it's a win. A quiet one, maybe, but a real one. And if you care about your rights, you should see this for what it is. Momentum. Finally, the government's not just stepping back, it's being forced to. Now, as always, you don't have to take my word for any of this. Every source I used in putting this together is linked down below in the description, so if you want to dive in, cross-reference the numbers, or just geek out a bit, go for it. But more importantly, I want to hear what you think. Is this move just a temporary shuffle, or is it the beginning of the end for the ATF as we know it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if there's a topic you want me to cover, just let me know.